Hello and welcome to this edition of the Plymouth podcast. I'm today sat in Leadworks on Rendell Street in Plymouth, and I'm with Nick Ingram, local poet. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning. How you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. So we're surrounded with a little bit of background noise today. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the location, Leadworks is a community interest charity. Is that what it stands for?
CIC.
Yeah, it's a CIC.
Social enterprise.
Enterprise, yeah. And I'm looking around me, and I'm looking to the right. I can see a small stage with some musical instruments, some mixing desks, and tables, a chaise longue, bookcases, a surplus food counter, and a small bar where people are drinking coffee. And it is a real community-spirited location, this, isn't it, Nick?
Yeah. Upstairs there's also artist studios. There's an exhibition area which they also use for music. You've got Plymouth Pride here. You've got Kaboom who do comedy improv and tap dancing. And there's a lot of stuff. They're putting a community kitchen
Yeah,
in at the moment.
yeah,
so if you hear a lot of banging,
if there's any background
yeah,
banging noises,
that's being crowdfunded.
That's the community kitchen going in to help feed those who are less well off than others.
There's comedy, there's performance,
Yeah.
there's writing, there's workshops, there's an autism afternoon on the Tuesdays, and there's other events that go on throughout.
It's clearly a space created or sort of dedicated to creativity. So what we're going to talk about today, because Nick is renowned locally as a poet and writer, we're going to talk to Nick about some of his influences and some of his interests in the poetic world. And I first came across Nick probably about a year and a half ago when I came to an open mic night down here for Creme de la Creme. Tell us a bit about Creme de la Creme and its ethos.
Creme de la Creme was set up by Pete Golding, Jackie Watcher, and a few others to present basically what they think is the best in Plymouth. At the moment, their writer in residence is Hazel Hon,
Yeah.
who's just actually was stood
She was
over
beyond
there.
the
She
bar.
was here.
She's
She was
gone
hanging
somewhere.
around just now. And it's just an invite night. People come, they perform. There's music. It's meant to be diverse. There's meant to be a lot of people that come in. We have some good audiences, and it's really meant to represent Plymouth. It represents Plymouth's grassroots
Yeah,
sort of ethos. Yeah,
I certainly got that vibe. That I should phrase this very carefully. That there are times, you have a vision in your head sometimes. And you said, "Oh, look, someone's a poet," and you're kind of thinking, "What's a poet look like or sound like?" And actually, in here, a poet was a complete cross section of the local population.
of the local population.
There was,
yeah.
there is no such thing as a standard poet here, is there?
No. I think we all look rather modern. We all look rather unprofessional.
Yeah.
Well,
there's something wrong with being edgy. There's
yeah,
nothing wrong with
yeah,
being
yeah.
edgy.
I think we just look as diverse as Plymouth. It's diverse. I mean, that's why we have Jackie Watcher. That's why we have sort of Maris Longstaff. That's why we have Hazel. That's why we have Jen.
Yeah.
It knows no bounds. It's a spectrum, basically, that goes from one end of Plymouth to the other.
Okay.
It includes some of the older poets, some of the younger poets, as you saw Sam at the week on.
Yes. There was a young guy. He was about 12 or 13.
Yeah, no, I think he's more about 20. But
Is he really? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, he's
Oh,
somebody who started reading. So
okay. Yeah.
I think he's doing quite well. I think he's getting better and improving, But I think that's why we do it, don't we? We sort of like put our work in front of people to improve our work, to work through it.
Absolutely. So I noticed at the last Creme de la Creme that someone was reading from a book I'm looking at on the table called Gin City, Writing from Plymouth, edited by John Mackley and Nick Ingram.
Correct.
Where did the inspiration come from for this book? And I just for the, oops, someone's throwing furniture around above us. Just for the benefit of anybody who's not aware of this, it's quite a vibrant looking cover. It is available on Amazon, and it is a collection of poetry, prose, and some artwork from the people of Plymouth. So where did this come from?
It started during COVID. We were looking at getting something going in this city, and there was no events going on. There was nothing really working. So we had an idea to start publishing people, to start putting together a collection of poetry to represent Plymouth and the grassroots movement that happens around Stonehouse, that happens in Plymouth on a wider basis, and these 2 volumes are the result.
I understand there's a third one on its
There's a
way.
third one on its way, yeah.
And
And local artists like Gabriel Marcellus Temple obviously gave us the cover for the first one. Alan Norman, who's got his opening over at Cafe Momus actually today at 6 o'clock.
Yes. But let's talk about you and your poetry. Where did you start? What was the sort of the point where you started to pick up a pen and start scribbling?
I was scribbling from about the age of 11, age of 12. I was reading a lot of fantasy literature
Yeah.
at the time. It was the 80s. We were playing a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Back then, we were sort of like reading a lot of Tolkien, Fritz Lieber, Michael Moorcock. And that sort of like pushed its way then onto sort of really classic Old English, Anglo-Saxon poetry. And that's where my roots sort of stand, even though now I sound more, I think, more of a modernist, more of a Dadaist and a surrealist, coming from a slightly more modern-centric European tradition.
I must admit, I was very impressed when you told me that Beowulf was an inspiration, and I thought I'll impress you and try it out. Oh, was that the Heaney? Yeah, go on, finish my sentence.
I think Michael Alexander's the better translation. I think he's more raw. I think he's more guttural. I think he takes in the original spirit of the text from the Cotton collection, and even with all the burn holes.
So you find that but you find within that style an inspiration yourself for your own writing?
I do, because I like it being hard. I like it being loose. I like it being unstructured, even though actually Beowulf is actually quite structured within the Anglo-Saxon sort of alliterative form of the line.
But what about modern poets? I mean, are there any of those that you kind of look
poets,
up to?
The one that sort of like really pushed the boat out was Whitman.
Yeah.
Which led me into American poetry. He sort of like breaks the line up. There's like 15 syllables to his line, and this is right in the middle of the 19th century. And we're sort of like in this country, we're still writing vaguely in iambic pentameter, and there hasn't been that movement towards breaking that form, although you do find some stuff, particularly with sort of John Clare, who's very loose.
Yeah.
It sort of like echoes Emily Dickinson in some way, or Emily Dickinson's a little later, but those would be sort of like 3 19th century benchmarks.
And what was the nudge that got you from just writing it to standing up and performing it? Because you are quite well known locally as a performance poet.
I think at the time I couldn't publish it.
Really?
I could publish prose.
Yeah.
But I had to put it in front of an audience at some point. So I started doing open mics. I started joining poetry groups.
So I've actually heard you read.
Yeah.
And would I be right in saying that the Nick Ingram I'm talking to right now is not the same Nick Ingram when he stood behind a microphone? Do you take on a persona?
There is a persona. I think we all have our poetic persona. I know some people call it poetic voice, which I think is a bit derogatory.
Yeah, no.
But I think there's a more manic, sort of performative kind of character that I've created for that. Because some of my poetry tends to be a bit chaotic. It tends to be cut up. It tends to be a bit loose. It tends to be a bit unstructured, even though there is narrative within there. I mean, something like an old piece like Say That, You Love Me, which I performed back on last Wednesday. You've got a rhyme section. You've got the internal discourse of the lad that's going through. I'm trying to be careful with language here, because
we know what's going on.
We know what's going on
in his mind.
It's sort of his relationship with this older woman that he sort of picked up in the tube, or she picked him up in the tube on Union Street, circa 1984.
Is this autobiographical?
No, it was a story that somebody told me, and I do know the people.
We'll leave that.
We'll leave it at that. Yeah.
So, the Leadworks itself has a poet in residence, or writer in residence, Hazel
Hahn,
and that's something that came to me while I was in investigated the background of Leadworks and the need for local creativity. I think when you come into a place like this and you think, oh, writer in residence, it actually sounds almost a little bit trite. But when you look at actually what's going on here, there's actually real meaning in this, isn't there?
I think it's a good position to have. I think it concentrates the scene towards certain things.
Someone's a figurehead.
And it becomes a figurehead.
Yeah.
And Hazel is a very, very good poet.
Yeah.
I've seen her do some really, really great sets. The one over Monmouth a couple of weeks ago that she did with the Kaboom crowd.
Yeah.
Was absolutely stonking. But I think there's a separation between what we do for creme de la creme, which tends to be new material or try material out on an audience, and what sometimes we put together for our sort of like standard sets if we're doing something a bit more professional.
So the creative scene in Plymouth generally, if we focus purely now on the spoken word,
Yeah.
I was really surprised because you were able to list quite a few places where you can go and listen to live posts. I'm going to invite you to do that again.
Yeah. Well, we've got Cross Country Riders, which started off at Plymouth Arts Centre about 30 years ago, run by William Telford and Kenny Knight and Tom Bolton.
Mm-hmm.
There's Provy Poets, run by Spencer Shute and Provy over that side of Nutley. Tom Bolton also runs Filth down at the Underground with his girlfriend, who is part of the burlesque scene down at Annabelle's and various other institutions. And that's a mixture of comedy, burlesque, music, and really filthy poetry at the time. There's Waterfront Riders, which is still going. I don't know where they meet at the moment. There's Language Club, which is run by established poets like Steve Spence, Norman Jupe. Steve Spence was obviously a T.S. Eliot nominated poet, and I think he was nominated recently for the Forward Prize.
Right.
As well at some level. I would have to look that one up. Obviously, Tom's an ex-Plymouth Poet Laureate. Kenny Knight publishes through Shearsman. So they sort of give a synergy to the scene. Pete Golding, who runs Creme de la Creme here, was always involved with the arts in this scene. He took over from me at Wonder Zoo when I left Wonder Zoo, and
I guess really the thing that struck me was that I've lived in. I consider myself a Plymouthian. You can clearly tell from my accent I am not. I'm an adopted son of Plymouth.
Yeah.
I've lived here since 1979, and it took until I think it was 2 years ago for me to discover that there were so many different spoken word events in Plymouth. It's almost like it's one of Plymouth's best ever kept secrets. Why do you think it's not that generally well known, that there's such a thriving spoken word community?
I think it thrives at a grassroots level, but it doesn't have support from the institutions.
Right.
And I think if you're into that sort of thing, you really have to go looking for it. You have to go to find it. We have very few writers who have who are involved with Plymouth Uni or with university or the Arts University as it is now. There doesn't tend to be that downflow coming out from there. Most of the people I know do not have creative writing degrees, with maybe the exception of somebody like Julian Isaacs, who was anti-pus a long, long time ago. William Telford's done.
Yes, Williams. He did his masters there, didn't he?
Masters, yeah. But he's also a journalist as well, as you know.
Yes.
At the Herald.
I've been to a couple of his readings at the house on the campus in the past.
And he's very, very good. He's very, very funny.
So, do you think, it's a tricky question this, do you think that it would be more important to maintain this as a grassroots venue with interaction with people in the local Stonehouse community? Or do you think this should grow? And, if, for example, somebody from Plymouth City Council came along and said, Nick, we've got a checkbook. We'd like to make you the Plymouth City Council coordinator of spoken word events, bearing in mind all the other ones that you just listed. What would you say was more important?
I think Leadworks has its uses as a social organisation. I think you need that grassroots kind of community feel, because I think you need to bring people in and you need that feed through. But I think, like a lot of subcultures tend to come together
Yeah.
and then they dissipate out into sort of like the wider sort of community, and people come bring in other activities and they develop their work, and people have to go somewhere. So whether it encourages people to go onto a university course to do creative writing, whether people develop their art or their crafts.
So
but I think you need that synergy to be able to bring it together and maybe
Yeah.
present it from a media point of view.
So in some respects, this needs to be kind of what it is to get to
At the
that
moment,
as an
I
entry
think,
level for
as
people.
an entry level. For
So there
people
needs to
come
there needs
through,
there
yeah.
needs to be somewhere for them to go beyond this.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah.
What
But
you,
I also think you need those figureheads to sort of like guide it
yeah.
in some direction. And I would love to do an integrated media thing for the scene where you like film events, you film poets, you publish poets, you get their work out there. Because part of Gin City is about getting work out there. It's about putting it to a wider audience.
And some of the people that have appeared in Gin City, of course, have started here.
I've started here. Some of them have started at Waterfront Riders. Some of them have started at Cross Country
Right.
Riders. Some of them have been on the scene in various forms before any of this existed.
So it's almost like I suppose, really, in a football analogy, we're like the English second division.
We're the second division.
We're looking for a promotion to
But-
the first and maybe the championship and one
but
day
we
the
have
Premier
to
League.
we have to make it to the Premier.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think there are poets that are trying, and I think if we get a mutual support network together, I think that really, really helps. I think it also helps creativity. That's why I run workshops, because I think it brings people together at a more practical level where they don't necessarily have to perform, but they can actually create. That's why I've run workshops for Shekinah. That's why I've run workshops for Central Library. Talking about, hey, going back to Hazel,
Yeah.
Hazel is going to be running a workshop coming up this September for Shekinah for about 6
Right.
weeks
That's good.
on some
And
form
of
or
course,
another.
for the benefit of those that don't know, can you just quickly tell us what Shekinah is all about?
Shekinah mission is a mission that helps homeless people sort of improve their lives.
Yeah.
It brings them back up, out. It gives them clothes, gives them food. It gives them an avenue to actually get out of that
Break the cycle.
situation, out of that cycle. Yeah. And it also offers a thing called Learning Exchange, which is run by the wonderful Dagmar.
Yeah.
And they do workshops.
And so all these
based around arts, philosophy, music, writing.
So this space that we're sat in now, then, it is more than just somewhere where people can actually, for want of a better word, promote themselves. It's actually a place of.
It's about sanctuary. It's about promoting community.
Well.
That's why Gay Pride is here.
Yeah.
You could also argue that it provides a safe space for people with protected characteristics.
So if you take a walk around the locality, I mean, we're based in Stonehouse, and I've met quite a few people down here who are very proud of Stonehouse.
Yeah,
I'm not saying that as a strange thing, but there is a civic pride for this kind of section of Plymouth.
I think it's coming back together here. I think that the area is coming.
Well, I can walk out of the door here, turn right, and within 200 metres, I'm in Cafe Momus.
Yep.
And I was very pleasantly surprised. I went to a couple of open mic comedy nights there. There's some
was that
music.
Press of Suspects?
Yeah, Killer Queen, I think.
Killer Queen.
Guys
yeah.
It's that curated that. I was surprised to go in there and see this kind of Mexican sort of mashup style cafe that had a mariachi band going on the Friday night, and then this week there's out the back they've got a gallery with a new show.
There's a new show going on tonight,
isn't there?
Alan Norman's work, who's on my front cover of Volume 2.
And then you move on to the corner, and on Union Street corner opposite the sadly dilapidated
Union
Palace
Corner,
City,
which is which is new. That's another community space.
And then you walk
That's got a
further.
kitchen.
That's right. You walk
You've got
further
the
down
palace
Union
in front
Street.
of you.
It's amazing how
Um,
much is actually going on in Stonehouse.
I mean, one of the great events I think from last summer was the boxes because of the night,
Yeah,
which sort of like gave you Union Street culture
yeah,
and Plymouth music culture. It was in St. Luke's.
yeah.
A great exhibition which came from their archive and built this kind of history of what Union Street used to be before it went
Yeah.
downhill.
Well, the Union Street I came to in 1979 was very, very straightforward.
Very
You
straightforward.
were either a Matlow or you were a Royal Marine, and you basically try to drink as much alcohol as is possible to drink in all the pubs in Union Street, and that was the beginning and the end of it.
In no doubt that you've only got what depot in Jesters, isn't it? And there's the Firkin at the top.
There's about 3 pubs left out of, I don't know, 30, 40,
40,
50, name them all. And you know, in some respects, that era has come to an end, long since come to an end, and areas have to reinvent themselves. Is Stonehouse reinventing itself?
I think it's reinventing itself.
And is it reinventing itself
as a creative hub?
The creative hub?
I think obviously you have Leadworks.
Yeah.
I mean, if you go out the door, like you said, and turn right, at the end of the street, just opposite, you've got the Oxford Hub.
Yeah.
Which is got workrooms, art studios, dance studios, and various other things. There's the gay pub Clarence.
Yeah.
Just over the back.
Is there not also a local radio station?
There's a cafe, there's Omnium Radio, which broadcasts on the web, which people do various things for. I can't vouch for the quality because I have a problem sometimes with some people's playlists.
Yeah, well,
but that's a personal taste thing.
You get that with radio too.
And then you come back around to Cafe Monmouth, who's only been open for now 3-4 months.
Yeah.
They've got gallery space, performance space. You've got the old morgue upstairs. You've got the escape rooms there. You've even got nerds in their natural habitat playing Dungeons and Dragons at neutral ground.
You're a dungeon. You can use that because you're a dungeon.
Further, do you want me to carry on?
No, please. Yeah, no.
Further up, you've got Union Corner, which was a community space I was booking. Probably 6, 7, 8 years ago. That's been there for a good 10 or 12 years. That's got a kitchen, community space.
But what surprises me is it almost seems like it's a deliberately well-kept secret that there is so much going on.
But I think that's a good thing about it. It's not the Barbican.
Yeah.
It's not union rooms. There's no Weatherspoons.
Yeah.
Here. It's not Pop World. It's off the beaten track, but it's about community. It's about creatives coming together. It's about other people coming together to put something together. It's about rejuvenation.
So, are there
I always remember there's a poet who was a founder of the Spoils Collective called Marion Mads.
Right. She
used to do a poem in which she used to call this a low aspiration ferry port. And there's one thing I've always argued against it. I think she's a lovely girl. I think she's a wonderful performer and what have you. But I don't think this is a low aspiration ferry port. I think there's a lot of people down here at different levels of society on different incomes who have a lot of ambition. They have a vision. They have things they want to do. They have things they want to create, but they just lack funding, money, investment to be able to do that.
Mm.
And I think it covers a spectrum of society as well. Because if you walk around, you've got obviously the gay community, the trans community. You've got the African community over at Jubileana, which is just off from the Octagon.
Yeah.
You've got spoken word, you've got exhibitions, you've got people creating art, you've got people doing dance, you've got people writing for the stage.
I mean, as someone who lives in Plymouth, and it was eye-opening for me to come down here the first time just after lockdown and look at what was going on.
Yeah.
and it is absolutely amazing. So
You've got a community kitchen going
yeah,
in.
I mean, so people can come and be creative with the food that they
Food,
can,
yeah, which
that
has
they can
always
pick
been a
up.
creative activity.
Yeah, wonderful.
Yeah,
Nick, it's been really good speaking to you today.
It's been great speaking to you.
And I hope that maybe at some time in the future we can hook up again and have another chat.
Yeah.
Maybe in a year or so's time, and see where Leadworks has gone in that space.
That'd be very interesting to
Brilliant.
see where
Thanks
it goes.
very much for your time.
Have a good one.
This episode of Made in Plymouth was recorded live at Leadworks, Rendell Street, PL1 1TP.